So today we'll be looking into the table, mainly the table properties and the different indexes and the relations. So relations indexes we have covered yesterday also, the delete actions, but we'll check some more properties on those and we'll take some questions. So before that, let me quickly quick recap. So I believe some of you might find these 2 days, like yesterday and today, bit technical and bit like more theoretical. It is there, but we have to deal with it because these properties and the things which we are learning now, this is very basic and this comes handy if you work for maybe 10-15 years also. So these are the things that you need to know, and as a like a technical developer, knowing about the data structure and the properties and everything is very critical for us. So that is why we need to go and learn on this more. Okay, so let us quickly do a quick to recap. So yeah, we learned about tables, data structure, queries. Queries also we told like how we create a query and why do we need the queries, just to store data from different table based on some conditions. So this was a simple example. Customer master table, we have customer transaction and we have customer invoices. So that was an example where we can use a simple query and we can show the data. So then again we discussed on the relations part. So what are the key relations we can define the tables on, because whenever we are talking about queries, we need to join these tables, right, based on some relations, based on some common properties, and those common properties are always some fields, right, whatever the fields we have. So those were normal field fix, related field fix, and foreign key. We'll discuss today more on this because I have like actually prepared a separate session for it, but we'll discuss that today. And delete actions also we discussed on cascade delete, restricted delete, and also cascade restricted delete. So these are the things which we have covered yesterday. Okay, and now if I go to the slides, so if you remember the key points whenever how we are creating the table. So this is very basic and I start with that. So we create the table, set the properties, edts, enums is fine, and then we build the table and use it as a database. This is the first thing. And also if we need, we can go for a query where we can have 2-3 different tables, we can join them at the data sources and do a build and use that as a data source also. This was a simple example where this can be called a parent table, and these are all small child tables. Now we discuss about the components. What are the components of a table? Okay, am I audible, everyone? I think someone can hear me.
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, these are the components we see. Fields very important. We know how to create the fields and what are the concept of the field groups. Definitely it's like based on the field groups we can easily identify the fields into the big forms. So maybe for a small form where you are having only few data set or few columns, maybe we do not need to have a field group, but by default, like Microsoft always advises us to create a field group, which is a best practice. But for the big large forms which we showed, which you have seen yesterday, right, so many different sections are there. Under each section there will have multiple separate subsections. We definitely should go for a field groups. But indexes we discussed, whatever the indexes we have, our primary indexes, how we create those indexes, and how, so we'll discuss about this more. Full text indexes, if you remember, these are used just to retrieve data faster from a large text. So if we have a text where we have are containing maybe more than 100, 200 or 1000 characters, where you are writing some description, from that if you want to retrieve data fast based on that, so then you can write your full text indexes. Relation we discussed, delete action we know, and state machines is for the workflows. Whenever we are creating the workflow, it helps us to change state in the workflow. So basically state transition. So in the workflow engine, workflow is nothing but your Okay. If you are not do not know the term workflow, workflow is nothing but it's a some operation where you can perform the approval actions based on each based on some conditions. Take an example. Maybe in your organization you have a policy, a purchasing policy, where uh, you are a junior employee or junior purchasing clerk, so you have the option to buy anything till 5,000 rupees. So for anything above 5,000, then you need a first level of approval, and above maybe that is for 5,000 to 10,000. Then for above 10,000 you need a second level of approval. So this is like the structure. So for me, most of the companies purchasing policy, they have this level of approvals, or what we call as delegation of authorities. We just don't need to go deep into that, but to just to let you understand this approval processes, or this structure of approval, or rather we call delegation of authorities, we can design in the system. And how we can design it? Through workflows. So that workflow enables us to design that whenever a purchase order or any other record where you want to enable the workflow, it is created. You can define conditions based on the amount, or based on some fields, or based on some condition, if else condition or true false condition. Those things you can define, and based on those conditions your records will be processed, so that you create a purchase order of maybe 12,000 rupees. As per your design of the workflow, it should go for two level of approvals. First level will be your immediate senior, and then it will go to your manager. So those levels of workflows or approval based on user group, that we can design into the system, and that is applicable for all across all organization, and that can be defined based on the different condition usage. So that is workflow. And state machine is nothing but is allows you to perform the state transition within that workflow. So that is a different engine altogether workflow. So that workflow state machines is allowing us to do that. Methods and events, I showed you. Methods is just the table methods where we are going and writing our codes. Okay. Events was not actually present in the previous old versions. We in our Dynamics 365 version we have our event, right? Why do we have those? Because in Dynamics 365 we are having our extension structure, right? Extension, where we are creating our extension and writing all our code. So some of the code we may need to write into the system, into the place of, where we used to write the code. Let's assume it has a method of inserted method, right? Insert method, where data is being written into the database. You are creating a data and you are saving that data. Whenever that data is getting saved, so insert is being called, and data is getting actually captured into my database. So I need to write my own conditions, or few enable few fields into that method. Previously, I can easily go and I can write the code into the insert method, which by default Microsoft provides into the method, which is an insert method. But right now, as we are doing our extension method, so we cannot go and write everything on top of it. So what we can do, we can create an event on them on that method. So that event we call as on, maybe on inserted, or maybe if you are writing something update, maybe on update. So that event we can call, and we can write the pre or post event. So pre insert, so pre means whenever that operation is being performed, just before that your code will be executed. And if you write that after your insert, so after your operation, that action or whatever code you have written will be performed. So this is the idea of the event. So this part will was not present and we're not using in the older version, but right now for our coding methodology we are using all these things, and this is very basic, and you will be using it across all the different systems. Okay. So this is for the all the table elements. So we'll be discussing more about the table properties, each of the table properties. So because in table, if you see the properties, like your head will go for a spin. So there are so many properties. We'll discuss the most important 10 15 properties. Yeah, like important also 10 15, so you can understand the number of properties and which a table has. And then we'll go for the relations, which is important, we discussed, and delete actions and the indexes. Okay, so
What is mappings, Maitra?
yeah, mappings is nothing but it's like, okay, delete the slide. Okay, okay, map is nothing but when you are writing the code, it's like an X++ element that wrap table objects. Okay, it's like it is mostly executed when you are writing a complex set of code, and allows the some fields, a field name, to access uh, I mean, okay, let it put it simply like, how can I say, it's an X++ element that is that wraps table objects. Okay, if you consider, if you have two or three different table objects and you have 10 15 different fields. Okay, now, if you define a map at runtime whenever you are writing the code, and that will create an object at runtime which will wrap those two table fields at runtime, and you can actually access those fields at the runtime. So that helps us to simplify the data structure and to retrieve the data. Okay, so with map, actually, I mean, you can associate a map field of one table to another table where you do not need the relations. Okay, so let's assume in one of the table one, where I create something and I have 15 fields, and I need to associate that database to a table 2, and I need to find a few of the tables. Okay, so then I can associate fields from my table 1 with a map field of my table 2, and that can create a database where you can store the data. Okay, so that is happening on the runtime. So that is I mean, for maps, it's a complex data structure. This is mostly used at runtime, as I said, in the large codes where you have to store data based on different conditions and based on different fields on the runtime, where few of the fields will be applicable to you, because the tables which we work on are mostly like of huge size, and where we have 100 200 different fields. So if you are using simple like simple select statement or simply retrieval of data, that increases the time of processing of the data in the system, because the transaction tables in the systems are huge. Because we had one of our clients where we were actually they were having almost 500,000 invoices per day. Okay, so if you see consider invoices, then you will understand they will have the sales orders, they will have the sales order lines, then it will be they will have the deliveries, then they will be having the invoices. It's a simple process. Not, I'm not considering any customization changes. So 6 to 8 or maybe 10 15 different tables are involved in that process, and daily they are creating 500,000 of those transactions. So you can understand the size of the database, right? So if you are simply going and writing some queries where you are actually uh, uh, just bringing the data based on some condition, so on runtime maybe that will not help. So that is why you can go and create a map element, which is like an element that will be wrapping those fields from few of the tables, and you can access those fields. Okay, so that is the concept of the map. Okay, so now if I go to, yeah, field groups, we have discussed, very important. So similarly, similar fields into the same section where which we can be using into the forms. And in, if you go to any big form, you will see against that there will be data source, which is a parent data source, and also into the different section you will find different field groups. And I told you the concept. If you have a section where you are using one field group. You do not need to, once you are adding a new field, you do not just need to go and add fields and into the form design, identify the place and then add those field, and then again like uh, to like tamper with the size, field size, display size, all those things. You do not need to do that. You just simply go and add this into the field group. The system will automatically take care of that and it will add the field into the form. Okay, simple. Okay, now we'll start with the table properties. Before that, any questions? I'll take some questions for 5 minutes and then we'll start with the table properties. Okay, so
Yes.
properties, yeah. So we'll there's few properties are there available in the system. So there are key properties. I mean, this is like I have written very few like table type, label, all these things. But we'll discuss more properties. So let us first start with the table type. So okay, I'll write it also because this is very important things to discuss. Table type. Okay. So we have three table types. We have regular table, uh, so we have these three table types are there. So what is a table type? So it's basically the nature of the table, if it is a regular table, temporary table, or in-memory table. So what do I mean by each of three? Regular table is nothing but a simple table where that table is actually being stored into the database, and you can go and you can perform all your actions. So it's I mean, when I say table, I mean it's a temporary, it's a regular table. It's no other thing we say. So wherever we go and it stores the data. What do I mean by temporary table and in-memory table? So temporary table is basically if you open a temporary table or in-memory table, you will see blank records. You will see all the fields. So you if you have like 100 different fields in a temporary or in-memory table, you can see those fields. But if you open the data table, you will see zero rows. So number of rows will be zero. It is always a temporary option. And in memory table also same. So if you open it, it will always show as a zero. But then why do you have these two? So we can have only one, right, for temporary. But why do you have this? So temporary table is basically nothing but it is holding the data in the database level, in the database layer actually. So until the scope is valid. So what do I mean by scope? So this first of all, where are we using these things? Any regular data where we need to see the data, where you're storing the data, we are using the regular table. But for any operation which is we are doing on a runtime basis, and that is based on some conditions, and after that operation we do not need that data, in those cases we can use temporary table or we can use in-memory table. What are these operations? It can be a report. So report is the like the main important option where you use a temporary table. So that's a most commonly used example where you use our temporary table reports in Dynamics 365. Okay, by report I mean SSRS report. Okay, SSRS reports in Dynamics 365, which is the main reporting tool for us. Similarly, in-memory table also can be used, but temporary table actually stores that data into the database layer till the time the report is being run, and after that it deletes all the record. So why it is used? Because today I go and I run the table report based on my own criteria, right? My own filter criteria, where I have to select maybe some dates, some parameters, which is for my own understanding. And tomorrow we will again run that report on a different parameter. So we do not need to store those reports because it helps us to run that report, generate the data on runtime. You can do all your analysis on that report because report is just for a reference, right? We cannot perform any action on the report. And after that, the data is deleted. So that is why this temporary or in-memory table is being used into our Microsoft Dynamics. And the difference is, as I say, temporary table, the data is being stored into that database layer, but for in-memory table, this temporary data is into client or server tier. So we have whenever we discuss the architecture we showed, right? We have the client layer, then database layer, then we have the application layer where we run our business logic. So in memory table, that actually store the data in client layer. In some cases, most of the cases, in the for the report we use the temporary table. Few of the big large reports where we are having to use so many database we are accessing or running the report, because there are few reports which runs on a monthly basis and that processes millions of data, right? So those cases, if you go and run the report, in that case, just to save the time or how save the report running time, you can use the in-memory table, which will not be storing the data in database level, and again that data will be fetched into our client layer. We just go and simply uh, run the report from the in-memory layer, where the temporary data will be stored in the client or the server tier. Okay. And this and I think there are few differences. In temporary table we can apply the securities. So again, every table we can apply security, right? So who can access the table and who cannot, so that can be given to temporary. But for in memory table we cannot do that, because that is restricted only for temporary tables. So yeah, this is the concept of regular, temporary, invariable. So if you understand this, like try to make a note of it and understand, because this is very basic thing and you will need it on a regular basis, because this question comes up like when we will be using a temporary table and in-memory table from the reporting point of view. If you are a solution architect and if your reports are not working and if that is taking more time, you will be asked questions like why we are using in memory or temporary table, which one will be better for performances and all those things, right? So that is very important to understand. So that is my first type of which we are discussing. Second thing is label. Okay, label is nothing, again we discussed we how we identify the table for the label, that is our label files. Primary index and cluster index. Okay, these two are very important. Let me write it down. Okay. So what is my primary index and what is my cluster index? So primary index is a unique key, a unique index rather, used for DB optimization. Simple, for our database optimization. And whenever it is used, it is actually uniquely identify one record. Okay? Unique index. So what do I mean by a primary index? If in my any master table or anything for a customer table or something, if I go and see primary index in the table properties, there will always be primary index set if we have anything primary, correct? uh, if we do not have a primary index, right? So by default, system have like system has one column which actually, and that is present in all the tables. That's a default column, and that actually identifies each record uniquely. Okay, what is that? That is called. So that is called my. Okay, okay. That is called my rec ID. Let me show you that. So this rec ID field is present in all my table. Okay, this is why is here showing up rec ID.
You are in the fields section. If you go to the table, then
No, no, it's in
you can
this.
see the table fields, right?
No, no, these are my table fields. Actually. Okay, if I open the table, I will able to show you. But okay, just to understand, let us go back to this. Just to understand, we have it is by default table, by default field, which system has if you remember I told you we have a GUID character type also, right? In our EPT type, so that's a GUID character type field, which is a unique number for each record in the table, and that is based for each table. So if you do not have any primary key, any indexes, primary indexes, then I mean, by default, if you write a select statement based on that record, that will also fetch you an unique record. But again, that is not recommended. Every time, whenever you are creating a table, we should always go and create a primary index which is uniquely identify only one record and which is used for my DB optimization. So, where we will be using it? Let's assume we are writing or fetching some record from my customer table, and if we go to my customer table and I see there are thousand of lines, I need to define some field which actually uniquely identifies, right? What will be that field? That can be my customer account number, which is this field, right? Which is a customer account number. So that account number is actually helps me to identify each record individually. Okay, so that is the purpose of the primary index. Similarly, if we go and identify which is what is a cluster index, so that is also similar. So that is also used for DB optimization, but that is actually helping us to identify each based like sorting the records. So if you okay, so some of you, if you know what is a database, if you have seen the database, how those datas are being stored, right? If you have seen those like big server room, right, where we have the servers and datas are stored, right? And if you know those like it shows like it has columns like ABCD, all these things, right? And whenever you're creating the data, you have like sound of and those data are being stored into those things, right? Because it is stored somewhere. So in that you have to retrieve the data, correct? So based on some order, maybe if you have storing your names, okay, let's assume the example of name, and whenever you go there and you are storing all your names into one field, right, which is a name field. Now you apply a cluster index, which is where the data will be sorted based on alphabetic order, right? So that will help us to optimize the DB search, because I am sorting the data based on alphabetically. So for that reason, I can go and I use my cluster index, where there will be no unique index like the primary index, what we call, but this cluster index will help us to expedite our DB search, where we'll be optimizing our DB operation, and we can easily sort and find out which records to identify. Okay, it's a very easy to understand example is my name or any text field or any kind of date field, where you can easily identify few of the record based on the date, and you can identify, okay, I need to sort the date field based on lowest to highest, or based on my recent to extreme past. So based on those conditions, I can define the cluster index. So this is the main important primary index and the cluster index. So if you see an example, let me show you the table properties. See, we have this primary index which is created as a account ID, and here for customer table, because they do not have other field, they have cluster index set as a account ID also. Okay, so this is for their own, like for our database optimization they have used this, because I mean for customer table they do not have any other that B2B optimization they do not do, so that is why they have set the cluster index as their primary index only, so that they can do. So we have this option to do that. Okay. Okay, so if we go to our the other properties, primary is configuration key. Okay, inheritance. Let me explain inheritance, so that will be important. So we have few things related to inheritance. So if you remember, we have I mean already discussed the concept of inheritance through extension, right? So what do, if we have our EDT, I can go and inherit the property of my parent EDT. that concept we discussed. So if you remember, there is an EDT, I create an amount. If I allow 4 decimal places and I use the same EDT, it will always allow till 4 decimal places, not more than that. So that is a property of the inheritance. So to put it simply. So if we go and if we see for inheritance, we have few things. Let me show you. So what is it? So, yeah, support inheritance. So these are the fields are there. So what do I mean by support inheritance? So if I need to inherit the properties of a parent table, I first need to mark it as yes. Okay, so this is the first thing. And uh, these are the two fields which will be like enabled if you mark it as yes. So what do I mean by that? I mark this inheritance. Let's say I create one table. So see, this is a master table and this doesn't inherit anything. So that is we are seeing like that. But if I go and create a small table and I need to access the properties of the table, then that will be my maybe a customer table one. Okay, let's assume. And in that table, I go and mark this property as yes, support inheritance. So what it will allow? It will allow us these two field in the extend field and the abstract field. In the extend field, you will be actually go and select that table, which table you want to extend. And in that case, for customer table one, that extension table will be customer table, which is the parent table. Okay. Uh, can you mute yourself, please? Okay, the abstract properties, again, as I said, if you mark it as yes, right, then only my abstract property will be, and what do I mean by abstract? So it's again related to my inheritance. So if it it shows if it is allows the inheritance or not. Okay, by
హలో
default, by
అక్క,
default,
పైథాన్ విత్ డిజాంగో అది కిరణ్మయినే కదా?
can you mute yourself,
అంటే
please?
మామూలుగా మన దగ్గర ఉన్న వ్యాలంటైనే పైథాన్ విత్ డిజాంగోకి ఎట్లా లాగిన్ అవ్వాలి ఏదో అడుగుతుండు. కిరణ్మయి నంబర్ ఇచ్చేస్తా అయితే.
Okay, admin, can you mute her? Hello.
హ, ఆ, సరే సరే
Okay,
సరే.
am I audible? Are you listening to her voice?
We are also.
Yes, yes, sir. We
Yes.
are.
Okay, I believe if you mute yourself, that would be great. Okay, if you go to the yeah, abstract, so this is by default, it always shows as no. Okay, and it is related to my inheritance, and it is unavailable as if you see, right? It is not used. Uh, So if yes, if you mark it as yes, then and then if you mark it as yes abstract, so what will happen? So that table cannot be actually direct target of any X plus plus SQL standard SQL statement. Okay, so if you mark it as an abstract table, okay, if it is an inherited table and it's that is marked as an abstract, so in plus plus SQL statement, that table cannot be direct target. Okay, so any statement if you write and go and try to delete some record and try to create some record through this SQL statement, that will not be allowed. Okay, so that is meant by my abstract form. Okay, this is related to the inheritance. So again, let me write it down. The inheritance part. Extent. Okay. Okay. These are the changes that we are actually discussing. And again, uh, key type, indexes, inheritance, You have to remember. I mean, if you go to any, I mean, if you take my class and if you go to and take another class, they will also stress on these properties, because this is actually important for my own understanding. Okay, for our understanding that how the table works and how the extension works. So you have to know all these properties. Okay, for the extension. Okay, so. Now we'll go to the configuration key and clustering and all these things. Okay, later the configuration. Okay, if I minimize the see, if you see, there are so many different sections or things. So in the properties also they have maintained different sections. Okay, see, this is for appearance or labels, and then behavior. I'll explain this too. Like what will be my indexes, cache lookup, and this thing. If the table is visible or not. Okay, so these are again visible means if you will not be able to see that form and table, and for the data also we have these things. Okay, okay. What do I mean by this? There are few things like for our database store, which is my configuration keys and these fields, my created by, date time, created transaction ID, data share type. These are very important few things. Okay, so what do I mean by configuration key? So configuration key is basically nothing but allows system administrator, who is the system administrator, to enable and disable certain parts of an application. So if you have maintain a configuration key, this table you have marked as a configuration key under ledger basic. Okay, who is a system administrator. So there is a section in the UI or in the ERP where you can create your configuration keys, which by default, I mean, this is a by default system gives us, and we do not go and tamper that most of the cases, where you have all these configuration keys enabled. Now if let's assume if you do not want to, there is some issue with some of the configurations, some of the database, and under you find all those database relates to one of the configurations, which is ledger basic. So you it is not possible for you to go and disable or enable all those tables under that same configuration. So system allows us, the admin only, just to go and enable or disable that configuration key. And if you go and disable that, all the tables, forms, whoever is using the same configuration key, that will be disabled. And if you want to excuse me, if you want to enable, those tables will also be enabled. So this is a primary idea of the configuration. Similarly, we have the country region codes, right? So this is for our codes, like whenever we are using this table for any one countries, like for let's say if this table is for just for Indian localization, correct, then I will go and select my country region code as IN, and the database, we in the database table level, if we have any country region specific field where that country region code is IN. So if you give you an example, these are all this BR, these are all related to Brazil country region code, correct. So if you see, so here if you go, I think I can show you, there is a field. Okay, these are all BR, which are for Brazil. This is IT for another comment. There will be few fields for CN, which is for China, right? All these columns are related to country region. And if for any country, I go and I select, where is my country region code? Here, yeah. If you select any country region code, and if there is any mandatory field, that will be enabled. And these fields are very important for our tax table. So for, because our tax structure is different for each and every country. For India, in our tax table, we'll have our state code, GST number, or our SGS, HSN code. All these fields are important, mandatory field, right? And if you mark those table as a country region code as IN, those fields will be enabled. But what happens, what Microsoft does, because the structure, as I explained earlier also, the ERP structure is so complex and so huge, if we have a major change in one of the application side, then we go and create a new table and relate it to the parent table. If you go and you will find tables for tax, maybe there will be a major tax table where you will be storing all the tax code and all those things. But if you go to Indian specific table, you will find a table called maybe tax table underscore IN, okay, which relates, okay, this is table is for the Indian localization only. Okay, this is the idea for the country region code. Again, this created by created date
Maitra,
time.
sorry to interrupt you. Can you just explain on the configuration key once again?
Yeah. So this is for our storing the data for each country region code. So let's assume I go and create this country region code as India for our localization. So that understood. So that helps us to identify. Okay, this table will be for Indian localization, and all the fields which are for my Indian localization, those will be enabled. If we do not do that, we can go and we can see all the data for all our across our organization. If you see any master table, right, our customer table, sales table, or our vendor table, you will not find any of this field because those are not country specific. We are not storing the data based on our country region code. Okay, in the database table, you will find the fields where you can identify, okay, this is for which country, but from the customer master table, it is based on no country region code. Few of the examples which I have given where this is applicable is from the tax structure, from the tax table, because each country has different tax structure. This ERP when developed, it was developed for US localization. United States has a complex like a tax structure which for each state specific structure, like how we have, it's a federal structure, each state have different tax rule, and if you go to central they will have a different tax structure what we had previously, which is our VAT, and where we had to give our state taxes and also central taxes. But right now we have a GST. So what Microsoft did, the tax table was there, but for Indian localization, they created separate tables like tax table underscore IN, which actually specified, okay, that table will be having a country region code for India and only Indian country data where like ERP legal entity code is country region code is IN or India, those data will be stored in that table. This from AOT, as I explained earlier also, if you open and see AOT, you might feel overwhelmed, right? Because you see so many data structure, but you have to understand for all our development purposes, we do not go and use all the tables. We just need to find out what is a table or what is the data structure we are using, and based on that we do our customization and codings. Okay, this is for the country region code. These three fields, if you see created by, created date time, and created transaction ID, this is for our database, I mean uniqueness point of view. It actually, if you mark it as yes, so all the data whenever it is created, your user ID will be stored against this. Okay, created date time, it is already yes, so it shows us when the data are being created. And if you mark it as created transaction ID, every transaction whenever or any data whenever it is created, it will be stored with a unique number, which is a transaction ID. Okay, so these are my important fields. Okay, so there are a few other fields which we'll discuss later, which are that not important, but again we have again some more important things we'll discuss now. So just remember, created date time, created transaction, and created these fields, these three fields are very important, because in some point we might come up, or we definitely come up with cases like we need to identify who has created that record, or who has created something wrongly or created some wrong entry. Correct? If we do not have any audit trail of any those records, then there is a difficult for the organization to pinpoint, okay, who is behind the mistake. So if we have enabled everything here, created date time and created by, then each record is stored based on the user ID and the created date time when it is being used. Okay, so this is one important thing. Okay, another thing I just want to see, which is this one again, modified by and modified date time. So each record whenever is modified or modified by whom and modified date time, it is being showed here. Okay, it is the same thing what we have discussed as modified. Similarly to created date time and created by, we have this modified by and modified date time. Okay, so similar one record who has modified the last modified record, modified date time and modified by will be shown here. Okay. Okay. Yeah, this is from a data audit trail point of view. This is very important. So few other properties related to my display and related to my like how we are displaying that into our UI. These two fields, which is our form reference and list page reference. What do I mean by that? So let us assume we have one form which is dedicated to my customer table, and I can simply go and select that form here. Form reference, I can go and select my form as customer form. Okay, here I just go and select my customer form. It will show. And what is the benefit of it? So whenever you are doing any database synchronization or whenever something is being changed in the form, this will be reflected here, and vice versa. Whenever if you are changing something, this will be directly reflected here, and this is actually very useful. I for field groups also, right? I go and change anything in my field groups and I select my form reference as my customer master forms. Instantly, whenever you're doing any changes to my field group, this is being reflected into my forms. Okay, so this is very important to understand. Okay, list page reference, similarly, if I have a list page form which is only showing my data, then only I use this list page form. So for customer table we do not have a list page because customer data, all this master data, very complex form. It's not a simple form, so that is why by default we do not share any list page form. Okay, so this is the major important fields which we have discussed. So remember, indexes, primary index, cluster index, inheritance table properties, table type, temporary in memory regular table, again country region code, created date time, modified date time. All these fields are very important, and we should have a good knowledge on this, because not only this is for if you for cracking interviews, if you go and work also, it is going to definitely come handy. Okay, so this is the idea behind it. Okay. So now we have discussed all these things. So let me share this. Okay. Yeah, inheritance. I created this, so I control by support inherit extend table properties, allow for sharing attributes, feed from base table, which is we have discussed. Which fields actually controls that, which is my support inheritance and extend. And for abstract is just to identify that is only an abstract table and it will not be used in any SQL statements. And it is allowing us sharing attributes. Okay. Yeah, this is for table inheritance. So this we'll see later, today, tomorrow. Temporary tables, yeah, this I think I discussed, right? Yeah, table type, temporary table, and in memory table. So used for reporting and defined by table type property, which is we can see here. It's a table type which is a regular, in memory, or temporary. This is the main types which we have discussed. Okay. So we'll quickly brush up through the indexes and relations and the delete actions, because we can show you that part, because that is again important. Before that, let me just stop sharing and I'll take the questions for a few minutes, and then we'll write on the relation and the properties. Okay. Any questions from your side on this?
Maitra, what is configuration key and data sharing type? Can you explain on those two?
Okay, configuration key. Okay. Let's say if the custodial example which you are saying, it has a configuration key of ledger basic. Similarly, if you go and find anything, if you are trying to have a employee master record, correct? In that maybe you will find a configuration key for employee. So that actually helps or allows us, uh, I mean most of the cases the admins are using it. It's enable and disabling a certain part of the application. So let's assume if some configuration key, if you have defined against one table, and that configuration key, or if you find some irregularities or some issues with that, if you can go and disable based on that configuration key. Okay, so that is primarily what we discussed. By default, if you go and create a table, it will be automatically, by default it will be showing a configuration key, and you do not go and need to like tamper with those configuration key. And as I said, is enabling disabling, it rarely happens. I mean, in my experiences, I haven't seen anyone doing those things, like going and disabling some configuration key. But yeah, just to for our understanding, we should be knowing what is a configuration key. Okay. Yeah, what was the second thing you asked?
Data sharing type. This in the table properties. We see single or multiple data sharing type.
Data sharing type. Okay, let me think on that. I think, okay, I think it is sharing data through different legal entities, if I'm not wrong. If I remember, okay. Okay. Mhm. Okay, 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 okay. So these are actually, I think, used for our like tables which are being shared across different legal entities. Let's assume we have a table called global address book in our system. Okay, let me show you that table actually. One minute. Okay, uh, let's say I have something called, okay, this is a third party table. Okay, so this is a table where all our party records. So party means if you are creating a customer, if you are creating a vendor, all this has a like a kind of a party associated with it. Okay, so that party is nothing but it is just a record which identifies that customer or vendor record uniquely, uniquely into the system. Okay, so here the so data sharing ID, and if you have, there is another property also, save data per company. If you see, this is set as no. So what do I mean by that? This is a global table, so this will not save data per company or each based on each company. Why do we need such tables? First of all, we need such tables because this can be a third party table, or there can be a table called system parameters. We have something called system administration section, and where we have system parameters. Those table we do not save the record per company, because in our all our like ERP we save record based on the each company, correct? And by default it is set as yes, because you need to store the data based on each company. So each company, if you go and open the customer table, you will see different customer record. Similarly, if you go and open your sales table, you will see different sales record based on each company. This table, it is showing they save data per company no, and the data sharing will be yes. Why? Because we this is a global table, and this address book, or this table is kind of a global address book table. This is actually useful to identify each party record in different companies. And why do you need that? So to have this, let's assume in you are running a business, and you are setting different companies in all companies. So let's assume you have 5 different countries where you have set up your manufacturing plant, and you have one vendor or one supplier in one of the maybe Asia Pacific region, who is supplying into all 3 of your locations, maybe Malaysia, Singapore, or maybe China. All these 3 countries he can cover. So what you will do, you will go and simply create the same supplier record in all the 3 companies. So that is a bad way of doing it, because this record is same, contact information, bank information, all those things for the supplier is same. So what do we do then? We create one party record or one vendor record in one of the legal companies, which is maybe in China. You create that vendor record and you select all this, save his address and save his contact information, address information. And in the next company, whenever you are setting up your Malaysian and you go to Malaysian suppliers, you simply bring that record to your uh, supplier record. So you just don't need to go and create that supplier record or that associated party again and like increase the database size or increase all those things, right? So that is why we have to create all these fields where we have our data sharing and the saved data per company. We have to mark it as yes, just to have our global data. So this is one example. Another example can be my let's say third person name. I think is it same? Let me see. Okay, so this is a dark person table name. So if you see, I think this is an also in save data per company. Yes, it is showed as no. So this is also a no field. So as I said, if we have created a vendor record, it will have his name. Maybe in one company it is marked as one name, the other company it will have another name. But do we need to go and create again multiple records based on that vendors, which is a kind of a duplicacy in the system? We do not need to do that. We can simply go select one vendor, have that party ID, go and attach that party to different companies. And how we are able to do that? Because we are storing that data based not based on the per company. So we can go and store the data based on our based on as a global level, so that data can be shared across all the different legal entities. Okay, so this is the idea. Okay, any other questions? Let me open the indexes. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, actually this one I thought of like covering today only, cover, but when we were discussing the indexes and relations, all these relations, so I thought of covering that yesterday also, so that you have a complete understanding what is the objects of the table. So most of the part we have already discussed my indexes, what is my primary index and what is my cluster indexes, right? So I create my table, and by default I need to define a primary index. Cluster index, if I don't define, that will also do, not a problem. But primary index we should definitely define if we have data stored based on some indexes or parameters. If you have a combination of field, that we also can identify into the indexes. So what do I mean by that? Let's assume you have a transaction table. So in the transaction table, you can have maybe say 30 multiple different transactions for one vendor, for one customer also, correct? So in one day also. So how do you define that? So maybe you can create a index based on your vendor or customer account number, and also the transaction date or transaction ID. So based on these two or three combination, you can create a primary index. So again, as I said, the primary purpose of the primary index to uniquely identify one record. It's not like a cluster index where you can just, it's easy for database optimization and sorting the record. It is uniquely identified record, which combination gives you unique identifier that you need to understand or you need to identify. That is from completely from the developer's point of view and the table which you are defining. Okay, so that is the idea of the primary index. Okay, so some best practices for indexes. So I think we have described this one or more fields: improvement, performance, ensure existing unique records. So these are for my indexes. Best practices. If you remember, always maintain indexes, development environments, specify primary cluster index. So limit the number of columns in an index. So yeah, if I which is, this is another important thing. Let's assume if you are trying to identify a primary index in some transaction table or in some table which you do not know, and you go and try to identify that, you just need to identify the minimum number of fields which enables you to identify the record uniquely. It's not like I go and I select 10 different fields and try to create an index out of that. It is not recommended at all. Your indexes should have minimum number of columns. Okay, so that is the idea. Okay, okay. Few questions. So anyone who is taking part of it, so if you can just answer this one.
False.
Anyone order of the columns? Yeah. So if you can, if you just go and write those indexes and columns, identify, based on that, system will identify the records. Okay. Specify client registers. Yes, it is best practice to identify primary and cluster index. So again, if you go and run, create a table and do your own best practice run, you will see if you do not mention that, system will by default show you best practice error. Okay. Okay, which of the following valid types of table indexes: partial, cluster, non-index?
Primary index.
We have primary index, we have cluster index, and we have non-cluster index. So parts, there is nothing so like partial indexes. Non-cluster index I will discuss later, but it's not such important. So primary index, cluster index, and non-cluster index. These are most important things which you have to learn. Okay. Okay, we think we have crossed time long back. Okay, so relations, just to give you understanding, we defined our relations and the delete action. Just to quickly give you an overview, like how we are creating the relations. Yeah, so relations defined on tables with related tables, and based on each of the properties we are creating the relations. So quickly we'll go through each of the relations. So normal relation, uh, based on each field we are creating our relation. If you remember the field fixed relation, and I think I have created a note out of it. Yeah, so field fixed, related field fixed is, you are creating a relation based on a field, but you are restricting the data only from the parent field, which is my field fixed table relation. So I create a relation, but I am restricting the data only from my base table, or which is my parent table, which is my field fixed. Similarly, related field fixed, it is opposite. I restrict my data from my related table or my child table, which is my field fix related field fix relation. uh, uh, okay, just to give you understanding, once you are doing any customization, 90% of the cases we are using normal relationship, because if we define that normal relationship, that helps us to retrieve the data, to get the data correctly, or to doing the delete action like cascade delete and everything, correct? So that helps us to do that. Field fix and related field fix, these are very specific cases. We like I related field fix we hardly use, but field fix sometimes we use, because in some cases we need to have this query maybe where we are only want the data based on that condition from the parent. We do not need the data from the child table. So in those cases field fix, but yeah, related field fix is very hardly used. Foreign key is something we use, but yeah, if you remember, we have a foreign key field in the parent table, which is a primary key in another table. So as an example, if we have in vendor table, if we have a registration number, which is a edt field, like a registration number field in my vendor table, again remember that field should not be a primary key in my table. So in my vendor table, if I consider the registration number, that is a normal field or edt field. Consider another table. In that table, that vendor registration number is a primary field. So that is called a foreign key relation. So because we are adding a relation based on a primary key field in another table to a foreign key field in our parent table. So that is called my foreign key relation. So these are the relations which we have discussed. Okay, so yeah, few of the properties for the delete, cascade, cascade, restricted we have discussed. So yeah, on delete, if you see these properties, you can see however you are discussing the delete action. Cascade, restricted, cascade. So cascading means simply based on the table relation, it will go and cascade the delete action. It will go and delete all records. Simple. Restricted means I restrict my the delete only to my table which is my main parent table. Cascade per restricted, this simply means I go and only do the deletion of that record in my child first, and then I go and do a cascade restricted delete. Okay. Okay, best practices. Yes, I think if you remember, name of relation should contain the name of relation. I think, but I mean, this is just from the naming point of view. So foreign key relations, we always create a configuration key, as you said, for the relation. And I think when you see the relation property tomorrow, the few of the properties I will show you that will understand this. And validate property always in navigation. Let's say this I'll show you. Say how we have this validate property when you do a relationship. Okay, so yeah, so with this we'll wrap up the session for today, and I will take some questions from all of you, and then we can go ahead and close the session.